Super excited to begin the next session, looking at how the Boston Red Sox connect community through technology. And I'm thrilled to bring up our speakers, Billy Weiss, Senior Manager of Photography at the Red Sox, and also Mehdi Malhotra, Staff Photographer at the Red Sox. Welcome both.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Greg, and thanks to the team at PhotoShelter for having us on. And then hello to everybody there in the creative community that's here joined with us. We've been big proponents of PhotoShelter and kind of real life users of PhotoShelter for a long time now here at the Red Sox and at Fenway Park. So we're always excited when we do get opportunities like this to share the exciting stuff that we've been working on and talk about how PhotoShelter really helps us out with those projects. Maddie and I will talk for about 15 minutes collectively, couple different really exciting things, and then we will leave room for Q&A at the end for 10 or so minutes. So please get your questions ready. We're happy for this to be a dialogue as much as this is a presentation. So first we're going to talk about our City Connect project, which was a really exciting campaign that we put together this year. And this was a kind of a different project for us to work on, something that took us totally out of our comfort zone here in Red Sox marketing, which we are always kind of trying to do and just push the boundaries of what's doable here. And we feel like, whenever you're kind of pushing out of your comfort zone, that's when you actually create your best work. And we're always trying to keep it innovative here when it comes to photography and video and the different types of visual content that we do. So earlier this season, the Red Sox unveiled the City Connect jerseys in partnership with Nike. And so this was basically a design for a new, fresh uniform that was in direct collaboration with Nike, capturing kind of the spirit of Patriots Day weekend, which is, for those of you who are familiar with Boston, kind of always a big event, always a big weekend in Boston surrounding the Boston Marathon.
So yeah, we found this kind of crew of incredible creatives. Chrissy Spacely is another stylist. Drew White is the creative director for Bodega, which is one of the city's kind of top shoe wear and apparel stores. And then the Super Smash Bros, who are a brother duo of musicians and DJs and producers. And so, what we did was kind of take each one of these incredible creative people and feature them over a series of video vignettes and photo profiles to document kind of the amazing work that these folks were doing here in Boston. We felt like it was important to have them tell the story. We felt like it shouldn't be about the traditional Fenway voices telling the story. It should attract new voices, new communities, new types of creative people that we felt best represented the boldness of the design overall. So over 8 full production days of shooting, we went out to different locations around the city in Boston, and we produced these video and photo shoots. And as we rolled these out, and as we rolled the jerseys out in our official announcements and releases, we also rolled these kind of stories out to the public and highlighting these great creators in Boston. Those 8 days of production obviously culminated with a shoot with our players. We of course had to have our players representing and modeling the jerseys. We were a little bit nervous to see how the players would react and embrace these new jerseys, but overall our team loved them. They loved the bold nature of it, and they felt like it really resonated with the personalities that we do have in our clubhouse. So it was a crazy week of shooting, but a great opportunity to kind of present some really great photography and videography to the world. So, being in Boston, we knew that we were taking a risk here. We weren't really sure how the reaction was going to be publicly, but we felt like we were prepared for it to go either way. And sure enough, it really varied totally across the spectrum. Some people, absolutely hated it. But surprisingly, a lot of people really loved it. They really embraced it. And this is where PhotoShelter really came in and helped us out in distributing, our imagery that we made from this campaign out to our media partners, both on a local and national level. And so we were able to make galleries that were easy to send out and easy to distribute to all of those partners. And then they did the work to kind of spread the word across the country and create a lot of buzz, whether that was good buzz, bad buzz. We were just happy that it was in the conversation and sparking interest in the game overall. So obviously, of course, we did wear these during games. Like I mentioned before, we wore them for the weekend in April over what would have been Marathon Monday weekend. And then again, we wore them for another stint here towards the end of the season for 2 weeks or so. And as you can see, they just really pop on field against the backdrop of the green and red and blues that you typically see at Fenway. The yellow really sticks out when they've got it on body and they're wearing it out on the field. And so it was just awesome for Maddie and I to be able to be out there and capture it all with the still photography and video that we're used to doing here. So, a lot of great takeaways from this campaign overall. We were thrilled with the response from the fans and love seeing the yellow as an element at Fenway. It definitely resonated with a new demographic, which is something that we feel baseball needs, and here at the Boston Red Sox, we also need. And it was definitely an exciting challenge for us to push ourselves, push the limits of what we can do something different and build some new relationships that will continue to foster here in the community in Boston. So that's the high level overview of the City Connect campaign. A really exciting project and definitely happy to answer questions. But we're going to switch gears and I'm going to turn it over to Maddie, who's going to talk to you about another really cool, innovative project that we've been working on.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Billy. So I think given the very thoroughly human and personal nature of our City Connect campaign, it's a really funny transition to, transition to the side of our work that's in the realm of something that's very much not human and is quite literally robotic. So today I'm going to talk a bit about our partnership with Nikon and Mark Roberts Motion Control, which we embarked on in 2019. So to kind of give you a sense of what I'm talking about when I refer to these robotic cameras, here is a photo kind of showing what the actual, see if this changes here, what this robotic camera looks like. So this is the exterior of it. This is actually an image from 2020, kind of a year after we started using it to kind of see the footprint of these and kind of what this looked like when it was positioned in our third base photo pit. But we'll kind of dive in a little deeper and I'll show you what kind of the innards of this robot looks like. And what it is a Nikon D5 equipped with an 80 to 400 millimeter lens that's fully controlled by us photographers using a Microsoft Surface Pro. And using the Mark Roberts Motion Control client on the Surface Pro, we're essentially able to control everything about this camera as if it was a camera within our own hands. So I'll kind of show you an image here of what the client looks like. If we can transition to the next one, let's see. Might be a little frozen up here. It is. And this is kind of like what we're working with as we're shooting using these robotic cameras. So this is just kind of a demonstration, but you can see that we can control everything about the camera from its position to the ISO, everything about exposure. We can capture in burst mode and kind of do everything you can do with a camera in your hands, but from a computer screen. So when we started working with these cameras in 2019, they were just kind of an experiment for us. It was a test to see how we could amplify the kind of imagery we make at Fenway Park, and especially given just how old this place is and how much time we spend here, it's imperative to our personal creative processes that we see the park differently. And in normal situations where, spending days kind of running around the park, we're always in motion and we're always trying to see things differently. So when we first started working with Nikon, it was just kind of gravy to our existing workflow. So we spent the last series of the 2019 season just kind of experimenting and creating these bold images and kind of getting used to the technology, which was so different. And I think we were a little bit hesitant at first to work this into how we shoot, because it just felt a little unhuman and it was weird to not hold a camera, and it was weird to be making images when we're so close or so used to being close to our players. But then 2020 happened, and it doesn't need much of an introduction on its own, but as we were deep into spring training, things very quickly went dark, and I think our idea of the kind of access we're used to with our players really quickly went away. But with the eventual return of baseball in July of 2020, we were faced with the almost eerie challenge of an empty ballpark and with no fans and with very much no access to our players or, you know, to other humans for that matter. So our workflow really changed, and our usual positions and a really crowded photo pit were suddenly not there. And when we're used to being in this really intense environment, crammed together with our laptops and cameras and facing the elements, suddenly we had to shoot the game from 6 rows back, and I could only wave and scream at our players, and suddenly there wasn't as much of a kind of a human face to what we do. So our workflow changed really quickly, and I think when we're used to seeing our PhotoShelter archive kind of full of imagery from fans, suddenly our 2020 fans gallery was empty, and images of fans were suddenly replaced by hundreds of images of empty seats, and kind of the same picture over and over of the red and the blue and just utter kind of emptiness. It was almost haunting for us. So we really wanted to, I think, return to that partnership with Nikon to create the kind of imagery that we're used to. So by installing these cameras in the places that we were used to shooting, whether that was in our home dugout or the third base photo pit, up on the roof or out in the center field bleachers where fans would usually be, we were able to install these cameras to kind of emulate that human side of things. And I think we're from the get-go, these cameras, these robotic systems were never meant to replace us as humans. We kind of saw that in the midst of a pandemic, they very well might. So I personally spent the better part of the 2020 season from a radio booth up in Fenway Park with the Surface Pro in my hands, controlling these cameras and kind of getting back to shooting the bread and butter action, and also kind of finding ways to get back to that closeness with players, and sometimes doing this little dance between the robotic camera and players as they sit in the dugout and kind of realize that there's this camera on them, which was all very funny at first. And sometimes it would be like a lot of back and forth between players and a robot, and you know, you could see that they were kind of eyeing the camera and they could hear the shutter, and it was all very silly. But what we found with this is that we could do our jobs again, and that was really, really exciting, when I think there was always the threat that we might not be able to actually physically be in the ballpark. So transitioning into 2021, our relationship kind of again changed with these robots, and we very much wanted to we were desperate, I think, to get back to the human side of shooting and visual storytelling. So we kind of went back to viewing the pods as a complement to our work, and it again allowed us to just beef up, I think, the kind of imagery that we were able to create and angles that we don't usually have access to. So while we're kind of back to shooting in our usual positions, we're able to have our camera in one hand and a Surface Pro in the other, and essentially be in 1,000 places at once. And I think we're really excited to see where the technology grows from here. So it just like continues to be a very seamless part of our everyday workflow and creative process.
Excellent. Thank you both so much for those sessions. Billy, some of those yellow jerseys are absolutely awesome, and Maddie, some of the shots you guys got from the robo cameras are really, really impressive. So I guess, Maddie, the first question for you, what's the future for the robo cameras? How do you see them? What sort of role are they going to play for you guys in the future?
Yeah, I think for us, we are really looking forward to, I think, technology that's going to allow us to kind of not think about controlling the robots from like the client and from the surface, so that like we can kind of harness their power just while shooting with our D5s, like in the photo pits. And as we're controlling them, like we know that we have cameras kind of surrounding us that are getting similar shots. So I think we just want to continue to see them and to evolve into something that we don't have to think about, essentially, so that we can really focus on shooting as like the human storytellers that we are, and focus less on, I think, loading up a program or kind of doing this weird like half human, half robot thing.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I guess related to that, what was that? You mentioned the Surface Pros, and you were controlling the cameras with the Surface Pros. What was the biggest challenge there, and how did you manage that with multiple cameras?
I think the biggest challenge was, I think, adjusting like the just the feeling of holding a camera and how that has, like, you know, when you hold a camera, it's very much an extension of yourself. But I think pressing buttons is very much less of that extension of myself. And the button layout itself, like, I think it's a very simple program to use, but it's just so different to see it from the screen and kind of see, it feels very much, especially at first, it felt like a toy. It felt like this like photo video game that we just kind of like, you know, sat in Fenway and played with a bit. So I think the biggest challenge was just seeing that these are the cameras we're used to shooting, it's just in a slightly different form.
Yeah, I can imagine the experience is, as you said, it's very different, and you know, holding a tablet compared to the cameras, different world. Excellent, thank you. Billy, one for you. You touched on the distribution of the content to press via PhotoShelter. Could you talk to us a little bit about that process and how that worked?
Yeah, so we get, you know, throughout the year, we get tons of requests from our, you know, the press for photos, handout photos. So we're always kind of sending out galleries through PhotoShelter, request galleries that they can kind of access. And so with City Connect, we kind of set up a gallery as like a handout to go with the release that went out to the media with, you know, all the text information about the campaign and the people we featured. There was also a link to PhotoShelter for that gallery of images that we created. And that was, you know, the uniform details, the photos of the players wearing the jerseys, and also our creative catalyst that we featured. And it just made the process super easy and streamlined. You know, we didn't have to field a ton of requests on an individual basis from emails of reporters or editors from different outlets, all asking for, you know, that stuff. They just had it in their hands right when the release went out, and it was a super smooth, streamlined process. So we're just grateful that we were able to, you know, use PhotoShelter to help kind of amplify the message and get it out in a streamlined way.
Great, excellent, thank you. And actually, we've got a couple of more questions coming in here. Let's take a look. Okay, more questions regarding the robo cameras. This is from Dan, and it's asking about the robotic camera experience and the shutter lag between the Surface Pro button being pushed and when the camera fires real time. So Maddie, this one's for you again.
Sure. So, you know, an ideal world where the connectivity is really strong, or we're wired in, and you know, the Wi-Fi is working really well, there's virtually no lag, and it's happening very much in real time. But frankly, like, it is a bit subject to how our Wi-Fi is behaving some days, and just the connectivity that's there on certain game days. So sometimes there is a lag, but when everything's working beautifully, it's kind of instantaneous. And you know, what you see in the client on the surface is like what you're going to get as you push the button.
Great, thank you. It's amazing in this day and age how much of our lives revolve around the Wi-Fi speed and the Wi-Fi connectivity. Yes. Just a follow-up question on that regarding the tablets. How does it impact the light, or how do you manage differences in lighting conditions with the sun, you know, being above or outdoors and indoors when you're trying to find the subject through the camera viewfinder?
Yeah, I think we kind of deal with changing lighting conditions a lot of times just by kind of monitoring what we're shooting as images come through the FTP. So kind of cheating a bit as we see those pictures come in. And I think sometimes there's a bit of a gamble, I think, in the same way as setting up a remote camera, is that there's only so much you can control for as conditions change. But I find that we're able to make adjustments like to changing conditions like the same way as holding a camera kind of in our hands, if that starts to answer that question.
Great, thank you. And actually, as we speak, the floodgates have opened with the questions about robot cameras. So we'll do one more. I think you touched on this in the session, but two-part question. How many robot cameras do you use? And I guess the second part of the question is, where do you decide where to put them, and what's that process like?
So currently for this season, we have 5 robotic cameras, 4 of which are Nikon D5s that we have positioned up on the roof of Fenway, and then we have 2 out in center field up high on one of our video boards, and one of those has an 80-400. The other is a wide angle lens that we use for some beauty shots of the ballpark. And then we have another camera positioned up on a light tower on the Green Monster. And then opposite that, kind of facing down the third baseline, is a Nikon Z6 that's dedicated to shooting video. So our decision as far as like where to position these like kind of started in the 2020 season, where we were kind of just trying to replicate the angles that we're used to, and our decisions were kind of rooted in like where can't we be that these robotic cameras can be. So as we kind of moved into this season, I think our goal was just like, where haven't we ever seen pictures from? Like, we've never seen pictures up from a light tower atop the Green Monster. We also just really love the reliability of having the camera up on high home, because it's a position where we usually set up a remote anyway for angles of action at the plate. So that really factored into our decision too, of what are the angles that we're usually trying to get with remote cameras, and how can we replicate that with like the consistency of having a robotic camera there that doesn't require us to run cards, or that's, you know, not susceptible to rainy, horrible, wintry conditions or whatever, that can just like be permanent and be really reliable for us.
Great, thank you. And then we're going to squeeze in just a very final one. I think this one's going to be quick. Just coming back to the Wi-Fi, because you're using Wi-Fi with those cameras, the question is, can you literally be anywhere controlling them, or do you have to be at the stadium?
You can quite literally be anywhere. I have shot games, like if I'm feeling under the weather and at home, like I have shot them on my living room couch, like playing with my cat, or sitting in the kitchen, or cooking dinner. I know at the very beginning of the season, we had some really snowy conditions, and we had a game postponed, and I was still just sitting all bundled up in my bed with the Surface Pro in my hands, just kind of like watching pitchers throw in like the snowy outfield. So that's like the really, really exciting part of it, is that like we never lose our connection to the ballpark with this system. And it's like, it's insane.
Like, connectivity is amazing. You're at home, you know, with your cat, having dinner, watching the game on TV, and
Yes.
taking shots. Wow. Well, Maddie, Billy, thank you so much for a great session. We really appreciate it.